You're on the clock at the 2-3 turn, and you are deciding to pick a quarterback. Is it going to be Josh Allen of the Buffalo Bills or Jalen Hurts of the Philadelphia Eagles? Let's discuss. Welcome into the fantasy football universe. I am Jeremy Schulman at FF_Rebel. This is Jesse Moeller at JMoeller05. This is the fantasy football universe, the double FU, the FU times 2. Welcome to our discussion of, I don't know why you're doing it, but you're picking a quarterback early in your fantasy redraft league, and you're deciding between Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts. So we're going to dive in and discuss it. Excited to figure out what these guys are looking like in 2024. Excited to talk to you, Jesse. How's it going?
I'm doing pretty good. I like the energy you're bringing. You're bringing a hot fire. I was like, all right, I got to wrap myself up a little bit. But yeah, like it's always a discussion if you want to, take these difference making quarterbacks and play the position because they give you an advantage. Like we've seen Josh Allen for basically 4 straight seasons. He's putting up 25 points per game. So yep. I understand, like, we kind of went full circle. Last year, people were like, you got to hammer those early quarterbacks. And then what happened? They all kind of fell back to the pack besides Josh Allen. So he was the still singular piece where it's like Josh Allen, even though Lamar was an MVP, didn't matter. Josh Allen was a far better fantasy quarterback. So can he keep it up again and under your 5 without Jalen Hurts? Without Stephon Diggs? Well, we'll see. And then Jalen Hurts, on the flip side, is he going to regress? I think it's an interesting discussion between these two guys because with their rushing floors and what they do and the paces they have around them, like, it's as much as we like Mahomes, like, I expect both these guys outproduce them. So it's really they're top 2 guys for me. Where do you kind of stand? Like, yeah, I can tell you're kind of like out on early quarterback, but if you're going to go early quarterback, what are you looking for with these early quarterbacks?
Yeah, obviously you said it. I mean, you want the guys who are the dual threat rushing, elite rushing production from the quarterback position. We're talking about guys like Allen and Hurts. We're talking about potentially guys like Murray and Daniels, Richardson, of course, guys who could sneak in and be those dark horse QB1 overalls, just simply because of that rushing floor. If those guys go nuclear, Lamar Jackson, obviously, if they go nuclear in the rushing department and put up 15 scores like both of these guys did on the ground last year, then it's absolutely possible for them to be, the QB1 overall. Allen and Hurts, they've done it before. They're probably going to do it again. They're going to be right there. So I'm excited to dive into it. So let's dive into it and talk a little bit about these guys. I think from the beginning here, we should probably just run through their stats. So let's talk a little bit about how they performed last year. We had, of course, Jalen Hurts. We'll start with him. Why not? Let's just figure out. Okay. So last year, Jalen Hurts threw for 3,858 passing yards, 23 passing touchdowns, and 15 interceptions. He added to that a bunch of rushes, 157 rushes for 605 yards and 15 rushing TDs, as we mentioned at the top. Josh Allen was a bit more of a prolific passer, so 4,306 passing yards, 29 passing TDs, but 18 interceptions. And then he ended up running the ball for just 111 times, but for 524 yards. And again, those 15 TDs. So not much there between the two of them. Is there anything that stands out from last year's production for you?
Yeah, it's just the floor seems higher with Allen. Like, if you look at the total passes, like, he still massively had more. I think it was like 60 more passes than Hurts. And Hurts was dealing with an injury too, so we can kind of talk about this. But he still had 15 rushing touchdowns, right? It's not like he was a terrible rusher. It's just the efficiency was there. And it seems like with the way these two teams focus their offenses, the Bills once again are going to be so heavily reliant on Josh Allen, where Jalen Hurts, they bring in Saquon Barkley. So I don't know if they're going to maybe take a little bit of work off of him and maybe give a little bit of Saquon, because I don't think he's rushing 150 times this year. We saw how injured he was throughout the year, where he wasn't moving very well, and it kind of hampered their offense, where Josh Allen, like, that guy just doesn't get hurt. I don't know what it is, and I don't want to jinx him or anything, but the guy's just like, he's literally like the juggernaut. He's just absolutely dump truck of tools, and he loves it, where Jalen Hurts is the same size, but he doesn't have the same presence when he's running the ball. He's like kind of a different rusher than Josh Allen. Josh Allen really looks to hammer people. Hurts not so much, and it just unfortunate sometimes that happens. But I think the way I'm looking at it is that Allen's the safer investment, but the ceiling's there. We saw 2 years ago. Hurts like goes QB1, 25.6 points per game. Theoretically, I think the low range is what we saw last year, were 21 points per game. I think that's the floor, and the ceiling's 25, and it's kind of that sliding scale where you want to go with his offenses. Maybe you regress with Allen a little bit. I just don't. I think he's going to just rush more. So I have more faith in Allen because he's done it for 4 straight years. Is there anything that particularly stands out between these two guys when you're looking at it? Is maybe it's the total pass attempts, maybe the rush attempts, anything in particular, how the offenses are schemed that separates the two of these guys for you, or are there QB1 and QB2 in your for a reason?
Yeah, I think they're definitely QB1 and 2 for a reason. I'm going to stay away from talking about the pass attempts right now because I'm going to get into that a little bit later. But the rush attempts for me were interesting. We know the tush push is pretty much gone, but it's gone because Jason Kelce is gone. Right, they're totally sliding in. I forget. I have his name somewhere here, but they're taking one of their guards and moving him over to center in Philadelphia, right? So we still have the continuity of the line, but people playing different positions. I personally believe that Jason Kelce was a big reason that tush push worked. And, Jalen Hurts and squatting probably nearly as much as Saquon Barkley's squats, is also a factor for sure. And now you got Saquon potentially shoving him in the back, maybe on the low because it's not allowed. But, that's the thing is you mentioned Barkley coming in, but the fact that not only did they lose their all-world center, not only is the tush push not allowed, but that now you also have a situation where the Philadelphia Eagles have a new offensive coordinator in Kellen Moore. All right, so it's just lots of turmoil and tumult there for Philadelphia. You have the same in Buffalo. You have continuity of the coaching staff, but Allen lost a lot of weapons. So I tend to agree with you. Allen's probably going to be running a lot more and Hurts probably a lot less. So we'll see how that affects their bottom line.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because 2 years ago they started to do the tush push. Last year the Eagles, they really just dove into it because they had such an advantage and they were kind of struggling with the offense. They were figuring things out. They lost Shane Steichen. He went to Colts. So you saw that impact on the offense as well. So now they have year 2 removed from Shane Steichen. I think they kind of get back to what they were, where they're not so heavily reliant on tush push. Like if it was 3rd and 1 or 3rd and 2, like you knew what was happening with the Eagles last year. They said, screw it. We're just going to give it to this giant human we have at quarterback who's going to win. And they were extremely successful. And you had a Hall of Fame center like you're talking about. So it's going to be interesting. And this is kind of where I get back to Hurts. Like I think the floor is a little bit lower just because you bring in someone as talented as Barkley and they paid him by far the most money of any running back on the market. Like you got the most guaranteed. His contract's the best. Like I know the Jacobs contract, but it's more of a 1-year deal. Barkley's there for 3 years. Like he's not going anywhere. That money is all locked in. He got by far the most. So I think they're going to try to make life easier on Jalen Hurts. That's the goal this year because they still have a really good roster and you saw how they implemented the defense. So I don't think they're going to need to be as heavily reliant on Hurts. Where on the flip side of Allen, like I know some people like Keon Coleman, like he's not my bag of tea. So it's really like, all right, what does this offense roll through? It's like James Cook, Dalton Kincaid, kind of similar. And we saw kind of the offense was figuring it out mid-season when they shifted offensive coordinators. They brought in the Joe Brady, and it kind of like it changed things a little bit. So if they're more of that second half offense, right, that was all Josh Allen. And I would not be surprised to see it where he's he's pushing up closer to what Jalen Hurts did rushing attempts. He's throwing it 650 almost other times. Like it's going to be the Josh Allen show. So I think between the two of them, there's a good reason why, in my mind, he's the clear QB1. But like Hurts is like the next guy behind him because the talent, everything around him, like he's set up to absolutely smash. It's just the offense coordinator figures it out. I think that's my biggest issue with Philly.
Yeah. And you brought up a good point. I mean, you're not going to be teabagging Keon Coleman anytime soon, as you mentioned. But the fact that, the Bills have such a turnover on the roster, right? Gabe Davis and Stephon Diggs, it's something ridiculous, like 240 or so vacated targets. I mean, we can't rely on those, but it's interesting to think about that from a quarterback perspective because Josh Allen needs to get used to a whole new cast of characters. I don't have the numbers in front of me. Maybe you can find it, Jesse, but, Khalil Shakir, I don't know how many targets he had last year, but it wasn't many. Dalton Kincaid, we know, was splitting time for a majority of the year with Dawson Knox when Knox was in there and healthy. The only time Kincaid had that volume to himself was when Knox was out with injury. So between those two guys, we have, Cook is a mainstay, but we got Ray Davis who's going to take some backfield touches there as well. And Josh Allen just getting used to all the balls that MVS is going to drop for him.
Yes.
And I'm trying to think of who even else is there. Who cares, right? I just think it's
Shakir and those guys. It's like the slot merchant guys. But I'm
it's
looking right
just
now.
like
So Buffalo is second in vacated targets and vacated receiving yards. Only the Chargers. The Chargers are whopping 250. Buffalo's second, 173 targets and 1,369 vacated receiving yards. Like that's a lot. That's a big portion of the pie. So I think there's more uncertainty with what Buffalo's going to do, and by that I mean it's just going to strictly go to Josh Allen. It's like, all right, Josh Allen, you are one of the highest paid quarterbacks in the league. Like you've done things all these last 4 years. You've been incredible. We need you to do it again, buddy. Saddle up. This is the Josh Allen show. So I think. Like that's what stands out to me. Like I'm not as confident in Jalen Hurts as being the Jalen Hurts show as I am Josh Allen. And like I just think the Eagles have better talent around him. Like you have AJ Brown, you have Devonta Smith, they still have Dallas Goedert. I know people are kind of up and down with him, but he's a good tight end. And then Saquon Barkley. Like that's a good nucleus with still a solid offensive line. So and then it gets back to Buffalo and if the changes they made to the offensive line, how much that affects them. Where the Eagles, they also are going through their own. So like we look at both these guys and you can make the case for it against either one of them, I think.
Yeah, but I think that's also the point, right? And it seems like you're leaning Allen. I'm leaning Hurts, and the reason is because you mentioned all that vacated targets and yardage, right? Josh Allen in 6-point per passing touchdown leagues was 3 points better per game than Jalen Hurts was last year, right? If you're moving down to 4-point, right, then it's it's like 1.5 or a point. It's pretty negligible. But in 6-point passing leagues, Josh Allen had that edge. He had 6 more passing TDs. He had quick math, something like 700 more passing yards than Jalen Hurts did. And that really was the difference between the players. Now, you mentioned the point that, well, Barkley's there. It's a new offense. Maybe they'll scale it back a little bit. But what do the Eagles do in the draft? They drafted a couple of wide receivers, right? They want that wide receiver 3. They drafted Aeneas Smith. They drafted Johnny Wilson. It's not that they spent premium draft capital on these guys, but it does seem like they are searching for that wide receiver 3 to run out 11 personnel in this offense. I mean, we know they're not going to be putting 2 guys in the backfield too often. We know Dallas Goedert has his history with injury, and if he goes down, they don't really have a suitable replacement for him. We saw that last year the last couple of years when Devonta Smith's numbers spiked because Dallas Goedert is out. So the thing is they're looking for that guy. So with Kellen Moore, are the Eagles going to pass more? And then with the fact that the Bills drafted Ray Davis, who's no slouch at running back, and the fact that they have all these new weapons, are the Bills going to look to run more? And if that's the case, yes, I agree that Josh Allen is going to get a fair amount of that work. But are you talking about more of a balance here? So it's tricky on both sides. But for me, I'm kind of leaning Hurts because I don't like what I'm seeing in Buffalo with Allen, even if they're relying on him more than they did last year.
Do you know off the top of your head who the wide receiver 3 in stats was for the Eagles last year?
It has to be.
And it was not Julio Jones. I'll give you that.
So I wasn't thinking Julio Jones, but I can't think of him. Go for it. Hit me.
All right. So it was Quez Watkins. He had a whopping 21 targets last year. So that was the 3rd highest wide receiver. So you could kind of see like the talent was so heavily concentrated on those 2 guys in Dallas Goedert. Outside of that, they were desperate for wide receiver. And this is kind of like we talked about in the offseason going to the draft. Like the Eagles need to improve the back end of that wide receiver core. It looks like they took the steps to at least try to do that. Now, we'll see if it works. I don't know, right? Because they're late picks. But they show some promise, right? So we'll see. But yeah, like with the whole changes with the Eagles scheme, to your point, I think they're getting one of the better offensive coordinators in the league. So he's going to figure out the best way to use the talent. And I know people are going to clown on the Chargers situation and stuff like that. They just didn't have speed, man. So like they had to force what they were trying to do into these slow older players, and it kind of led to this stagnant offense. With the Eagles and the skill players they have, it's going to look drastically different, and they could actually do things a little differently because like we all like Keenan Allen, like I like Austin Eckler, but they're kind of handcuffed to what they could do. You can't have them be speed merchants, so like you kind of have to force stuff underneath. So with the Eagles, you have 2 of the better wide receivers in the NFL. You have Saquon Barkley. I still think he's a good NFL running back. I don't think he's the best, but like you
Mhm.
could evolve him more. Dallas Goedert, like we talk about, and then you bring in whoever you want to be the wide receiver 3s. You let them battle it out in camp. You get a guy that could just be a solid NFL wide receiver. You split them out wide, like this works out, and you could do good things offensively. So I think the skill position talent is better in Philadelphia. I don't think many people would argue with that. But I think with Buffalo and the way it works and the way they're trying to set that offense up, it really fits what they're trying to do. That's why they got Keon Coleman. Even though I don't agree with it, him playing X, like his skill set, I think can work with Allen. Could do some short underneath stuff, or like these could do some more yak, some screens, things of that nature, where it just makes life easier on Allen. So it's interesting to see because Buffalo does have this fascination with these like short underneath these like slot merchant guys, like even that's like with Kincaid to a point too. Like all these guys kind of do a similar thing. So it's really you need Dalton Kincaid or Keon Coleman, one of these guys to take a step forward. And I personally think it's going to be Kincaid. I think he's a very good wide receiver. But if it's Coleman, it opens up that offense and does something different because as good as Stephon Diggs was, like the second half of the year, like he struggled. And the offense, like he wasn't really a featured focal point. So it doesn't seem like they're trying to make Keon Coleman the guy. Maybe it does happen, but like I think they're trying to focus around the players they have in the building. So with Allen, he's been 24 points per game or better the last 4 years. Like he's been incredibly consistent. I don't think it dips very much. Maybe it dips a small amount, but like he's just such a good player. And I think that's what I come down to is the talent between the two. I think Allen's better quarterback than Hurts. And that's kind of what I defer to. If you look at his PFF passing grades, he's been above Hurts like every year in his league. Like he's been one of the better passers. So I think when I'm betting on talent and if I trust the situation, which I do with both of these guys, I'm going to use the differentiation between Allen and Hurts to kind of be like, all right, this is why Allen is a tier above for me because I just think it's safer. But to your point, like if you prefer Hurts, you can get him a little bit cheaper, save yourself the ADP. So if you're on the clock, would you rather spend I think it's like the 30th pick on Hurts or is that where you're kind of going with these two?
So 30th is what? Early to mid round 3.
Yeah. And then
where's Allen going?
I think he's like 18. Let me double check. I just pulled this
18 is mid round 2.
Yeah, it's steep, man. It's very steep.
It is steep, but I get it. I hear you with the security. I think there's too much uncertainty for me for Allen to be. Look, I love to get elite guys, but I also look for safety within those elite tiers of players. We talked the other day. I would much rather have the safety of Jamar Chase over the elite ceiling and talent of Justin Jefferson, because the safety that I am looking at with Chase is the fact that he's in the same system. He's got his quarterback. He's got the rapport. He doesn't have all the change and tumult that the Vikings are experiencing and Justin Jefferson specifically is experiencing. So these are two elite guys. But for me, the safety is in Jamar. I'm here again with Hurts. I feel like he's well insulated in that offense. I feel like, he's other than the offensive coordinator, he's got the same weapons. We know what to expect from him. And no, he might not rush for 15 touchdowns, but he's not going to be running around with wild abandon like Josh Allen is going to have to be, because Allen has the worst offensive line. It's debatable, but it's the worst offensive line, I think, for pass protection. He's got, the worst cast of weapons when compared to the Eagles. He also has the worst defense, so that works for him in fantasy. But there's a lot of things that are up in the air. The other thing to consider is that Philadelphia Eagles have by far the worst division when compared to the Buffalo Bills, right? Contending with Miami and the New York Jets. Those are going to be some interesting battles as opposed to whatever the Commanders and Giants are rolling out. And, Dallas is going to Dallas. So, it is what it is. For me, I'm going to go Hurts. I'm going to wait around. I'm going to get two elite players, position players. And if I'm going quarterback early, I'll go Hurts in the mid third because that way I feel like I have more security, not only on my roster from the first two picks, but also in the fact that Jalen Hurts is going to produce well, even if he doesn't have that elite ceiling. How about you?
Yeah, it's like, I like the way I've been talking. You can kind of tell I go Allen here. I just trust the safety. Interestingly enough, like they're gonna have a hard strength schedule because the Bills won the division last year. The Eagles finished second, like they didn't beat the Cowboys. So it's kind of interesting how that works when I'm looking at the strength of schedule. It's very similar. Like there's not much difference between the two of them, but that's another little like feather in the cap. Like employees odds, I mean they're really good at strength of schedule. I think they have the 9th hardest. The Eagles do, and the Bills are down at the Bills are at 23rd, and that's like we talked about with the division, I think a little bit. So it's it's interesting you take that little, nugget in your cap because we're deciding between the two of these guys so much. But yeah, if I have to choose between the two of these guys, because theoretically, if I'm going early, I'm going to take the guy I'm more sure about. I personally would much rather just push it back a lot farther. Like you talked about, you take a Jamar Chase around 2 or whoever, and then you get a Richardson or like a Stroud later. I think that sets your team up a little bit better how you want to build. But if you want the guy you know is going to be good, and like I know I've been kind of talking down Hurts a little bit, I think he's a very good fantasy quarterback. So I defer to Allen between the two, but it's actually a good discussion and close. Just you can look at ADP and see how you want to build.
Yeah, totally agree. Well, listen, this has been a discussion with between Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen. It's one Hurts, one Allen. We didn't really help you make a decision, but hopefully the discussion helped you a little bit to parse between these two guys. In redraft, you got to do what you got to do. If you go quarterback early, consider one of these elite guys. You don't want to be stuck in a middling tier where you're looking at, Joe Burrow, who is going to be a decent quarterback, but probably not super elite. Get one of these rushing guys and consider a top tier athlete at the position early, or like Jesse said, just go late. So for Jesse, I am Jeremy. This has been the Fantasy Football Universe. Please check us out everywhere. We are at thefantasyfootballuniverse.com. We're on Twitter. We're on TikTok. We're Apple Pods, Spotify. We're over on Reddit. We got an AMA going on right now. So check it out for us. And check us out. We'll be here every day, all off season and through the season to help you as much as possible with your fantasy needs. So thanks for joining us, and we will see you again tomorrow.